So let's evolve from just using Git locally and integrate Git and GitHub functionality together. Now remember, Git is just a piece of software. It's a version control system that allows us to track changes in code or projects over time. We can have local repositories, we can have branches, we can log our changes, we can see who did what, and so on and so forth. Now that's just a a very basic overview of it. Now GitHub is cloud-based hosting service for Git. It's I think now owned by Microsoft, so it's not going anywhere, and it makes collaboration easier and sharing code easier while using Git. So right now we just had repositories locally on our machine, but right, if we need to share our code with other people, we still didn't have a way to do that. I guess we could put it on a USB drive and just pass it hand to hand, right? But that would get very messy very quickly, right? So GitHub allows us to have remote repositories, push all of our changes into the cloud, and have other people work with us essentially together. There are several alternatives to GitHub, Azure DevOps, I believe, Bitbucket, but GitHub is probably the most used one in the development world. So the first things that will need to happen, right, is creating a GitHub account. So I'll assume that you already have one, and now we want to integrate our local Git software and our GitHub account so that we can push any changes and anything that we have locally to GitHub and possibly share with others, right? Now, in order to save our local changes to GitHub, we're gonna need to link our locally created repository to a repository on GitHub in the cloud. So first, we will need to create a repository in GitHub. So we'll go to create repository, depending on your view and whatnot, your dashboard, just look for this button. And how about like I'll name it bookstore, and it says okay, bookstore is available. If you already have a repository named bookstore, I will say bookstore is not available and whatnot. So you might have to, you will have to choose another name. Here's your description, public or private. Public means anybody that looks at your account, your GitHub account, can see this repository. Private means you control who sees this repository. So basically like your coworkers, collaborators, anything like that. If you want to add a README file, you can add a README file. If you want to add a git ignore, remember we talked about ignoring certain things and not pushing and not exposing the information that should be for your eyes only. So you would do that here, and it has a bunch of templates. So like if you're working on a Node.js project, it will generate you for Node.js. If you're working, let's say, on a Python project, it will generate you that. So you don't have to think what needs to go into git ignore. You might have to edit it depending on your project, but it generally generates really good default ones. Licenses, we won't worry about that because everything that we're going to be doing is going to be open source. So we'll create that. I'm not going to add a README, but you could if you really want to. So I'm going to create a repository, and we have some directions essentially. Quick setup. So again, Git is evolving. If you have GitHub desktop, we can set it up with GitHub desktop. We'll take a look at that later. But I will give you generally the directions on how to link your local repository to this one here. So what does it mean to link our local repository? Well, let's kind of explore what all of these commands mean and what we have to do. Let's first go back to our local project and let's try a command called push. Push essentially says, hey, I'm gonna take everything that I have committed here and now we'll push it to your remote GitHub account. Now we've set up in the config the username and an email, right? So some logic would dictate that, okay, Git should know what to do. It's, if I'm gonna say git push, it's gonna go and find my GitHub account by that username and email that we have set up and save our changes to GitHub. So let's do git push. Now, we have a scary message, fatal, no configured push destination. And what it's telling us actually is like, hey, okay, I understand what you're trying to do. You're trying to push up your changes to GitHub, to your GitHub account, but I don't know where do you want me to push it at. Meaning that you're not just gonna push everything into one destination on your GitHub. You need, because that would be just a mess essentially. You need to tell me where I'm gonna push that repository, and that is essentially our remote. So this is our local repository, and on GitHub, where is our GitHub? This is our remote, which we've set up when we created this repository in this account. So if I take a look with this command, remote-v, we have nothing. Well, because this local repository does not have the remote yet, the remote destination. So let's go and take a look at the GitHub directions and see how we link them. So if we went from a brand new repository, it tells us, okay, init, add whatever, make a commit, and then add origin, git remote, add origin, and check it out. It's not that it's not that complicated in the end, because you're saying to Git, hey, the remote destination is going to be github.com, our GitHub username, and the name of the repository that we created, right? Okay, but we already have our existing repository, so we can push an existing repository from the command line. So I'm going to copy this. I'll clear this up. I'll say, okay, git remote add origin. So this is going to be our remote, and this is our destination. Now, if I do git remote -v, oops, not remove, -v, now Git, our local Git, will say, hey, this is where I'm gonna push the changes, and this is where I'm going to fetch the changes from. Okay, so that's great, right? Everything is pretty much working. So then we'll follow some directions. This is basically if we want to rename the branch to main, but our branch is already main. And then we'll say git push u origin main. We're saying, okay, we're going to push our main branch to GitHub. And then we press OK. Whoops, access denied. Now, what does that mean? That means that even though we have the correct username and the correct email, we still don't have access remotely to this GitHub account because we don't have any sort of authentication, whether it be password, right, token, that technically Git does tokens now, or SSH. So we're gonna need to make an access token, which will authorize our local Git software to our account on GitHub. So let's do that next. Now, first we're going to need a personal access token. Personal access token will essentially identify our local Git software to our GitHub account. So we're going to go here. We're going to go into settings. I'm going to go into developer settings. Now, personal access tokens are here. We can do a fine-grained token, which is a little bit outside of the scope here, or we can do a classic token. So we're going to generate a new token and generate a new token classic for general use. I will call it whatever the Ubuntu system. We can set an expiration date for 7 days, 30 days, 60 days, essentially when the token will expire and when you will need to do the same thing again, essentially. I'll set it for 30 days. You can do it for longer. You can do it for no expiration. If you set it no expiration, Git might warn you. In this case, I'll set this for 30 days. Here, are all of the options. For now, we will check all of them, meaning that this token, which will be linked to, that's this our specific local Git software, will have pretty much every possible permission, all of the access. If you work in a larger team, depending on your position, your token, whatnot, might have specific access and specific permissions. All right, so this token, I'm going to copy to the clipboard because I will, well, you will never see it again. I will never see it again. So I'm going to copy it here. I'll copy it here and, well, I guess I'll keep it here for now before it disappears, because we're going to need to configure our credentials first. The way that we're going to save our GitHub username, password is this token and whatnot, and this is going to be different depending on the machine that you're on. So it's very similar with Mac and Linux, but essentially some settings are going to be a little different. So I'm on Ubuntu. I'm on Ubuntu Linux. So my command to config Git, or in this case, to store the token, is going to be the following: git config -- global credential dot helper and store. Now, if you're on a Mac, it's going to be a little bit different. On the Mac, you're going to be using OS X keychain in pretty much every version, every modern version of the Mac OS. So your command is going to be git config -- global credential dot helper, and it's going to be OS X keychain. But since I am using Ubuntu Linux, I'm going to go back and mine is going to be stored. And I will press enter. Okay, so nothing really happened, but something did happen. So let's see what happens now if I do the same thing that I did before: git push -u origin main. Essentially, I'm trying to push the repository again to GitHub. I'm saying, okay, I want to throw it up to GitHub. Now we'll need to re-enter the username, and my username for this account is what? I need to grab that again. That's Yuri's test account. Great, so I'll copy that in and I will paste that in there. And I will need the password. Now the password is the actual token. So I'm gonna go grab this, copy it, and I'll paste it in here without any quotes, anything. I'll just paste it in. Now it's not showing it, but it's actually hidden underneath the hood, and I'll just press enter. And now we have some sort of output. It says enumerating objects, counting objects, all of this thing, new branch. Now, and it pushed to this repository. Let's take a look back at our repository. Open this up here. And look, we have our books.txt. Pretty cool, right? Everything that we have on here, or locally, we now have in our GitHub account. And that's about it as far as the setup. Next, we'll go and explore on how to push up changes, pull changes, create branches. Basically, a lot of the things that we have had gone over in the Git basics, but now we're going to be working locally with our Git software, and also on GitHub as well. And we'll also go over cloning, the difference between cloning and forking, and how to collaborate, how to open up pull requests, and so on and so forth. So that's coming up next.